It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Joining me today is Jay McBain. Jay is CEO of ChannelEyes, a global software company that is reinventing how vendors drive channel partner sales and loyalty. And they have a SaaS platform that includes two components, a Channel Candy, the world's largest mobile-first product for partners, and partner sales, as well as Optics, the first indirect sales workflow product to help sellers with predictive analytics and leverage big data science to drive more sales. Jay, welcome to Accelerate.
Well, thank you, Andy, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So take a minute, introduce yourself, and I will say, just by way of preference for people listening, you've got a frighteningly long list of accomplishments and achievements for so young. And I'd go over them, but it only make me feel more inadequate. So maybe you can brag about yourself for a while.
No need to brag, but there is a way to get yourself on top 20 lists and top 30 lists, and that's something I learned pretty early on. I spent most of my life actually in big business. I joined IBM as an intern in 1994, and I was behind, if you've ever called a 1-800 tech support line, back in the 90s, I might have been the person that picked up the call. That was my internship. It turned into some sales roles, always really focused around channel partners, alliances. 20 years later, fast forward, and I'm now CEO of a channel-focused SaaS company that has some pretty cool things that we're doing to help organizations of all size work through these indirect sales channels.
So what was the impetus for the founding of ChannelEyes?
We had a couple of things. One thing is, and we'll probably talk more about this, but the channel is a little bit of the redheaded stepchild in the sales conversation. And sometimes it doesn't come up, sometimes it's an afterthought, and it's one of these things that the tools that have been created for channel professionals many of them are antiquated. They go back to the 1980s, 1990s, and they're not getting the advantage of many of the big data tools, mobile tools, social tools that are available today to sellers. And we saw that as an opportunity. The one statistic that really drove, this idea was that 95% of partners, these are the people that resell for you, they could be retailers, they could be resellers, wholesalers, they don't come to you anymore. They don't come to your portals, they don't come to learn, unless you force them to. They're not out there, coming to you every day, trying to get better at what they do. So the world's become a push world. We thought through some combination of social and mobile technologies, we could put the right information in the palms of their hands and start driving some better collaboration, with the people that they represent.
So you're saying for the role for the channel account manager, the channel manager inside a company, it's become even more difficult to get their channel partners, the resellers, to sort of comply with their mandates or their program, enroll in their programs or whatever they're rolling out to the channel.
Absolutely, and it's nothing, to their discredit. It's just the fact that the world has become so noisy, so cluttered, that many of these partners are just trying to stay in business themselves. They're trying to establish their own brands. They may represent big companies like an HP or an IBM or a Microsoft, but they don't have the time, to go out and spend hours on end educating themselves, getting up to date on the programs. So it's a little bit of a risk. And I always flip over to cars because most of us have bought a car in the last few years. You tend to know more than the car dealer rep when you walk in, to buy a car. And it's just this fact that being inundated with that much information, it's very difficult to stay ahead of the customer. So
the challenges, though, for channel management, as you write about, it's more than move beyond sort of the old relationship management. There's a lot of parts to it, the moving parts they have to manage. But if the channel partners are sort of less cooperative, then how do you begin to fix that?
Well, a couple things. One thing is, I'm not sure if they're trying to be less cooperative. I think that it's one of these things that there's just not enough hours left in the day. And I don't think vendors have, and these are the manufacturers and people that have partners, I don't think they've done them a service with getting the right information into their hands, at the right time. So, it's become this colossal waste of time trying to find the right information and zero in to get what you want. So a lot of people have given up.
So you've released Optics really to sort of deal with that part of that's challenge, if you will, for channel account managers to be able to support their partners.
Yeah, and we see the world, and when you look at the channel, it's really two different worlds. You've got these partners or retailers, resellers that are out on the street representing you as a company, selling to your end customer. And that was one side of our business, which was really channel candy, getting them the right information, the right tools, the right incentives, all the right things at the right time. So, perhaps they'll recommend your product over your competitors. But the second thing was really the people that manage channels. You mentioned channel account managers, different channel professionals. Their hands are a little bit tied as well in terms of, they've got big territories. They don't have great tools in terms of knowing who to talk to, what to talk about, and really, when to talk to them. And, when we looked at the research and, we started collecting a lot of data around partners, we learned that, and again, I'll flip back to cars because most people get the car dealership scenario. The impact that a partner has on whether you sell your product or not is much larger than what you would guess, just looking at the numbers. The last time that you went in to buy a car, and if the salesperson was rude to you or ignored you or you just didn't get a good feeling, what happens is you may not buy the car from them, you may not buy the car from that dealership, but more often than not, you're not going to buy the Ford, you're going to go buy a Chevy. Just because of that experience, it could turn you off a manufacturer altogether. And when you sell computers, when you sell software, when you sell healthcare equipment, when you sell really anything, financial instruments, insurance products, that resides in every industry where these partners are representing you as a company. And if they turn people off or if they don't have the selling skills, you're going to lose the deal regardless of what your product, price, place, and promotion is.
Well, you're right. And I think to provide context for this conversation we're having is, as you had mentioned earlier before we came on the air, that 75% of, well, you give the statistic, about percentage of commerce is done through indirect sales versus direct sales.
Yeah, it's 75% of all world trade, according to the World Trade Organization. If you look at it a different way, 60% of all US GDP overall is done indirectly through different routes to market and go-to-market strategies. So as much as we focus on the direct customer sale, the chances of that being some sort of convoluted, multi-party, type of process is more likely than not.
Than not, right? So, Optics, as you have, is a predictive analytics tool, which certainly we've talked to, had guests on the show that have predictive analytics tools for B2B direct sales. So, how's this help the channel account manager in an indirect environment?
Yeah, it's interesting because the algorithms are very different. And we have a sales organization here, and we use some great predictive analytics tools here. We know when to call somebody when they're more likely to pick up the phone. We know what leads are more likely to convert. We have some really nice tools that help our salespeople. But what we don't have, and most companies don't have, is an ability to work their channels into that. So again, knowing, for example, the confidence score, whether you're going to win a deal or not, the influence that a partner has on that is pretty large. So it goes beyond how good your rep is, how trained they are, how equipped they are, and all that type of stuff. It actually goes into the partner itself. Do they have a history of success in these kind of deals, these kind of partners, this geography, this industry?
Deal size.
Deal size. What are their stages? How long do they spend per stage? What are their sales? I mean, there are at least 65 data points that we pull in from the channel in particular to add to the confidence score, whether you're going to close the deal or not.
Which is really interesting because, and one of the things you talk about on the website is that, about the product, is that you actually then, through the predictive analytics, you can sort of help compensate for maybe the less than perfect implementation of or use of CRM, adoption of CRM by the partner.
And absolutely. So, when you're a channel account manager, and you may have 100 partners in your territory, so you've got the 80-20, problem where, you're managing maybe 20% of the partners that hopefully are driving 80% of your revenue. You have no idea what's going on with the other 80. We have, part of the predictive tool is we can alert you when things happen. And it, maybe with the partner themselves, it could be big data, it could be happening on a social sentiment, it could be happening Dun & Bradstreet, credit score changes. I mean, there's thousands of things that could be going on with your partner that may affect whether you're going to win that deal or not.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and they could be completely out of your control. We're talking people changes, we're talking organizational changes, strategic changes. These are things that may impact your deal, and unless you're notified and alerted to that, you won't be able to take action. And you may be chasing a deal that now has almost no chance of winning, based on those changes, and you're giving up the opportunity cost of working on the things that matter.
Yeah, well, it seems like one of the problems that I've seen with channels is, for instance, I had a client that had a nationwide franchising organization, as well as some resellers, and they were selling a product that going here from $35,000 to $60,000, so $35K to $60,000. And yeah, the 80-20 distribution absolutely applied, but the more successful the franchises became, the more independent they wanted to be, and the less they wanted to reveal all their details in the CRM to the home office.
Absolutely. So, we've tried to augment that, perhaps lack of sharing with some very specific, actionable type of alerts and notifications that, if we can guide channel account managers or the people selling with channels, if we can guide them not only who to talk to, but when to talk to them. The other interesting thing is that when you analyze direct sales, that every rep is slightly different, or maybe significantly different in terms of how they work the stages, how long they take to sell a deal, how many deals that have a high confidence rate that they lose. I mean, you could think of dozens of different factors. When you actually overlay the channel, and there's 65 additional factors that we put in, the confidence score actually goes much higher. The product that we've now put into customers' hands has a 97% accuracy rate on a forecast. Now that we're pulling in the channel-related data that perhaps the vendor themselves don't have any control over.
Huh. So 97. I mean, that's a big claim.
Yeah, that's before the machine learning and everything else. But when you take in the factors and its history, it's the time, it's the age, it's the stages, all the traditional things you take in on direct sales. When you actually look at your partners as well, they also have similar metrics, but specific ones to them as well that produce the whole story of whether you're going to win a deal or not.
Wow, I mean, you think in most sales environments, if you could have a system that produced a forecast at 97% accuracy, that would be, people would be knocking on your door for now till eternity to get that product.
Yeah, and that's one of the big selling points, but the other one is the real time. As a sales manager at the start of the quarter, you have to go through every single one of your reps. You have to know who the sandbaggers are. You have to kind of adjust up or down based on history and what you know of that rep and their performance. And basically at the end, you have to throw your thumb into the wind and make your call.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What we like to say is let the computer make a call at the same time, but there's no thumb in the wind. We basically look at every single deal and every single aspect of every deal, and we roll that up into a real-time forecast. So if you looked at that an hour later, the forecast would be different, albeit slightly, but as you know, time kills deals.
Right.
And all of those external factors that I talked about, people changing jobs and things happening out in the industry. If you were working yesterday on a deal on Cisco, either they were your partner or they were your customer, that announcement of job losses yesterday would impact your chances of winning this deal. Trying to sell something into Cisco right now when they're going through this turmoil, and everybody today finding out whether they have jobs, will delay your deal.
So how do you make that decision? How much weighting to give that?
A lot of it's based on history. The interesting thing, I'll keep picking on Cisco. They've had 5 job actions in the last 5 years.
Right.
So if they are one of your regular customers or one of your regular partners, there may be some pattern match.
Okay, so you could see, based on previous announcements, that delayed deals by 30 to 45 days, and you factor that in.
Yeah, and you might see a seasonality thing, because by the way, their year end is in July, so come August 17th is when they do their
earnings announcement, right?
Earnings announcement, which yesterday they announced 5,500 jobs. We'll see probably around this time through, let's say, end of September, you haven't won any business over the last 5 years due to this. So if you think that there's anything in your pipeline closing in that time period, we're going to automatically change that scenario.
I like that. That's very clever. Yeah, I had one client that was selling through HP as a channel partner, and yeah, every June they did expense control. Must have been a manager's bonus period or something during that time, it seemed like. Yeah. And yeah, if you thought you were going to get an order in June, no, it just wasn't going to happen.
So, and IBM is in January, and you look at every one of your partners, and there's going to be patterns that emerge over time. That, and we're just talking about a couple of different factors out of the 65, but just patterns in this area will directly affect whether a deal will be won and when it will be won.
Yeah. All right, so I want to talk about an article that you wrote now that I thought was fascinating, and actually it's a couple articles that I'm drawing from a couple, that you talk about this trend that I really think sales professionals and managers really need to understand, and aspiring entrepreneurs even, is that you talked about hyper-focused vectorization versus verticalization. And besides loving the technology, why don't you explain what you meant by that? Because the implications for decision making are pretty astonishing, especially if you're in an IT-related field, a SaaS software company or whatever. Its decisions aren't being made the way you think they are.
Yeah, there's been some big changes. And by the way, these changes have come around just recently. This hasn't been like the cloud or other types of trends that we've kind of seen over the course of a decade. What the cloud has basically done, and the offshoot of the cloud is SaaS-based companies. Mark Anderson wrote that kind of famous article in the Wall Street Journal 5 years ago that software is eating the world, and he was pointing to the prevalence, which later on would become Uber and Airbnb, and basically software startups that eat entire industries. And we saw that in music, we've seen that in movies, we've seen that as you walk through every industry. And
I think it's worth telling people too that they don't perceive of Uber and Airbnb and others being software companies, but they fundamentally are software companies.
Exactly, and they took on, and iTunes took on the music industry, and these are software-based things that have changed companies.
Physical industries. They've transformed, right?
And the offshoot to that was that every company is becoming a technology company. So when you go, and Airbnb's competitors like Hilton and Holiday Inn and all these hospitality companies, if you read their annual reports, they're basically technology companies now. And those people that work there, the consultants, the partners, all the ecosystem around these big companies are really focused as technology companies now. And it's changed every industry downstream. So I always, I come out of the IT and telco world, but I'll flip over and talk about accountants. There's 160,000 financial accounting type companies, you could call them partners, in the United States. In the last 18 months, it's flipped over. 50% of them now resell software and provide IT-related services around the software. And when they were surveyed last year by CompTIA, they actually reported 85% said that within this year or next year, they're going to be basically technology companies as opposed to financial companies. There's a direct example of technology or software eating the world and every company becoming a technology company. So the landscape or the ecosystem of where you buy technology and how you buy technology has completely changed. The one statistic, and this is the one that I've written about more than any other, and Gartner Group has been kind of tracking it, is that 72% of all decisions now around technology are made by lines of business executives. These are VPs of marketing, VPs of sales, operations, finance, HR, manufacturing, across the 10 or 12 lines of business. They're making 3/4 of all technology decisions, whereas 5 years ago they were making 10% of decisions. It's a complete change in how end users and customers are making decisions. And Gartner is forecasting that 72% number going to 90 within a few years. In other words, everything is going to be made at the line of business level, and IT is going to have very little influence and very little, decision-making ability, as we go forward into the next decade.
So when you think about, decision-making dynamics, because, so much of our economy now is selling technology-related, IT-related products and services that it always, as you said, 5 years ago, you wanted to buy Salesforce.com, you had to have IT involved. Now what you're saying is, you don't necessarily have to have them involved.
Right, and I kind of wrote a previous article that I kind of called out this shadow. It used to be called shadow IT or rogue IT was the labels it was given. And what I kind of argued that it's been given a new shadow channel that goes along with it. So every one of those 160,000 accountants or the 120,000 marketing firms, or I could go on and on across every industry, they've become the technology salespeople that sell you, Salesforce.com. They're the ones that implement it. Salesforce, for example, has 695 partners. They sell over $20 billion in services, almost a 4 to 5 to 1 ratio for what Salesforce sells.
Right.
So you can think of the integration and the security and all this stuff that layers on Salesforce and the consulting wrapped around it is worth $4 to $5 of the MRR that Salesforce is earning. And this is a shadow channel. These are not these channel partners. They're companies like Blue Wolf, who was acquired by IBM, Aperio, it's Accenture, it's Deloitte. It's big companies in there as well. But many of them are mid-sized to smaller companies. But they don't specialize in things like security or infrastructure, building servers in your back room, or making sure that you're compliant with industry regulation. These aren't traditional channel partners per se, but they are people that traditionally would have sold you consulting, but now they're selling you software. And they're building the software, and customizing it and tuning it for your shop.
Well, and the technology now is making it so easy for people to become technology companies or offer technology solutions or to innovate in much more specialized ways than they were before. And you gave a good example, as you said, traditional supplier maybe specializing in certain industries such as healthcare, losing to firms that hyper-specialize. You gave an example of someone saying they hyper-specialize in lead generation marketing at mid-sized hospitals in New York State, for instance. That level of specialization opened up by technology provides so much opportunity for entrepreneurs and salespeople.
It absolutely does. And, in my industry, kind of in the IT and telco related channel, I was putting up alarm bells to say that, over the last 2 decades, there's been a real push to verticalize. You can't just go out there and be all things to all people. You've really got to specialize. So, there's several of these companies that said, yeah, you're absolutely right. And they went in this case, your example, they became healthcare specialists. So they could tell you what HIPAA stood for and the HITECH Act, and they could kind of walk through Obamacare with you and all the different aspects of healthcare. And then in the end, they wanted to install a server and plug it into the network and do the firewall and secure it and do traditional things to healthcare customers by just being smarter in that industry. And now what I'm kind of arguing in this article, the difference between verticalization and vectorization. I just made up a word.
No, I love
Vectors, there's more than just the industry. You need to be a line of business specialist. So your example there was marketing. you're talking to the VP of marketing. You can't just sit down and say, hey, I know high tech and HIPAA and I'm pretty smart. They're going to ask you, well, I don't care about any of that. How do you get me more leads? I want more people walking into my ambulatory care clinic, starting next Monday. And, if you're sitting there going, biddy, 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 you're not going to win the deal. The next person that walks in that says, well, listen, here's how to get more leads in your environment, your size of, clinic in New York, in this case, upstate New York. Here's what I did for the last 4 clinics that compete with you, and how I drove, 30% more, walk-in business. That's a different level of specialization than, anyone has seen. And you will have enough business that, you could swim in a lane 1 or 2 over if you needed to. Maybe a bigger clinic, smaller hospital. You could go a little bit wider. Instead of just lead nurturing, you might do some more top of the funnel type of work. But if you stay pretty close to those vectors, you're going to have enough business to provide years and years of paying the mortgage.
Yeah, well, I mean, the temptation to swim in another lane, as you talk about, as long as you, I think, establish and maintain that specialization, then you're not going to have the price pressures you might have, the competitive pressures, because you're describing an environment where there's, which I think is what is going to come to pass, is such broad opportunities and such broad opportunities for specialization that it may actually, in some interesting way, may actually reduce competition in some respects.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So now you've got this, example of somebody in with the VP of marketing, 2 offices over in the finance, let's say the VP of finance at that clinic. They're not talking to that person because, they're more specialized or vectorized in leads and driving, marketing success, that they're now talking to a very specific financial based, person who's recommending, NetSuite, for example, because they just installed it at 3 similar type clinics and how it's going to drive better, financial ERP type of connections and lower their costs. So, in that, let's say mid-sized clinic, you could have a dozen type of channel partners engaged at all the different lines of business. And, they may or may not be working with each other.
Yeah, and I think that's more likely than not. And so you sort of do some rough math on the back of the envelope saying, well, gosh, you have 280 sub-industries and 10 lines of business and 6 segments and 20 technologies that based on the fact we have, as you said, close to 100,000 sort of SaaS-type vendors today, it could be 10 times that in 10 years or 20 years.
Correct. And I think this is, we're just seeing the early stages of this now. I mean, the permutations and combinations to this thing are mind-blowing. And every single permutation, you take every one of these vectors, that if you're an entrepreneur, that's a place where you can start. You can go win your first 5 or 10 customers locally, build yourself some software IP. In other words, learn how NetSuite will somehow connect to that Marketo thing in the example we just gave, and build yourself, some sort of dashboard or some sort of interconnect or something that's proprietary that you can actually, wrap a brand and a logo around. And all of a sudden you've taken your first 5 or 10 customers in a consulting business, and now you're selling to ambulatory care clinics across the country and maybe across the world. And you've just built yourself a $50 million SaaS business in one of those vectors.
Yeah, have you ever read Jay Samet's book, Disrupt You?
Absolutely.
I mean, one of my favorites too. And this aligns with it so perfectly. Actually, I just interviewed Jay earlier for the show. I mean, this is, if you want to understand how to prepare yourself, the people in the audience, how to prepare yourself to take advantage of these opportunities that Jay McBain is talking about, pick up a copy of this book, Disrupt You by Jay Samet, S-A-M-I-T, who also has been a guest on the show, and it'll give you a game plan for how to orient your thinking to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and you had interviewed one of my investors earlier, Nick Poulos from Bowery Capital, And if if you're deciding to go to get funding today and, sit in front of venture capitalists or angel investors, and you're trying to paint a picture of the next Facebook or the next Uber in front of them, you're going to get shown the door. Your chances of success are just beyond their risk tolerance of what they would do. But if you start to paint a picture of, and in a sub-industry by a size sector, by, a certain geography, if you start to paint a picture of where there's a big opportunity, and, you're not painting the next Fortune 500 company, but, you're actually drawing something up that could be a $100 million business, you're going to get a lot of eyes and ears out there in the investment community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, great. Well, gosh, go to the last segment of the show. I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests. And the first one for you, Jay, is, if I think you said you've listened to the show before, so you might know what's coming, is hypothetical scenario in which you have just been hired as VP of sales at a company whose sales have stalled out. CEO and board are anxious to get things turned around. Admittedly, can't do a turnaround in a day, but what 2 things could you do your first week on the job that would have the biggest impact?
I've actually been put in this position a couple of times before, and I'll tell you what I did do.
Great.
First of all, I'm very data-driven. So the times outside of customer time, outside of 9 to 5, from 5:01 p.m. through 8:59 a.m., I would immerse myself in data. I would ask the business to dump, whatever CRM data they had, whatever financial data they had, and I would sit in front of, basically spreadsheets and systems, trying to make sense of, key metrics. And we're not talking high-level KPIs here. It's get an understanding of the flow, get an understanding of the pipe, get an understanding of, how sales are generated historically. And, walking into the first week of a job, it would just be a total immersion. The second part of it, and again, I've done it a couple of times, is spending the time between 9 to 5 with your people. If you've got sales reps, spending time listening. Ask enough open-ended questions, but try to spend 90% of your time listening. And if you get a chance to go on the road and visit a couple customers or join into a couple of customer calls, even if it's silent, start to immerse yourself on that side of the business as well. At the end of the week or two, you put the data and the kind of the real world together, put your notes together, you probably have a 15-day report you can give back to your new CEO.
Love it. Great answer. All right, some rapid fire questions. You can give me one-word answers. Elaborate if you wish. The first one is, when you, Jay, are out selling ChannelEyes services, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
Persistence.
Who's your sales role model?
Wow, Lee Iacocca.
What's one book that every salesperson should read?
The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell.
Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell. Good book. All right, last question. Tough one. What music's on your playlist these days?
I've got a really, so you've read my blog, my personal blog. I've got a really odd one that, I'm very data-driven myself. This is going to be my long answer. I'm very data-driven myself, so I actually keep track of my top 100 songs in order. And I also publish them on my blog. And they change each year. And the 600 songs that are on my quote-unquote iPod, yeah. I also publish those every year. So they're public knowledge. But when you actually do the data analysis, somehow, somewhere, I like sadcore music. So, the tear-jerking, breakup songs.
Right.
For whatever reason, over half of my 82 favorite songs are like sad songs. So I don't know what that really means, but perhaps I'm so logical in life that, emotion takes over. So
you married with family?
I'm married. I've got 4 beautiful daughters.
What's your wife think about your preference for sad breakup songs?
She just rolls her eyes and continues on with life.
I love it. Okay, well, Jay, thanks so much for being on the show today. Tell folks how they can learn some more about ChannelEyes and also get in contact with you.
Well, great. We'd love to talk to folks, and channel is a big thing. I mentioned to you at the start of the call that out of the 230 podcasts before this one, the word channel, partner, or alliance doesn't show up. So, we're hoping to drive some more channel conversation if it is, whether you're a hybrid seller or whether you're, a channel account manager and doing this 100% of the time, we'd love to talk to you. Our website is ChannelEyes.com. It's the word channel, EYES.com. My personal email is jaym@channeleyes.com. You can email me directly. Love to set up some time to chat.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jay. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And easy way to do that is to make this podcast Accelerate a part of your daily routine, whether you listen in your commute, in the gym, or make it part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Jay McBain, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your sales. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.